Hello and welcome. We are back. It is finally time for another painting tutorial. A full tutorial this time because it's been a little bit since we've had one of these and we're super excited to get back to them. Today we'll be taking a look at the 8th Legion, the Night Lords. We're going to be doing a relatively simple color scheme so that anybody that wants to paint along can. We're going to begin with undercoating the entire model with Chrome by Vallejo Air. We have a couple of announcements as we get started here that we'd like to make. The first and most interesting of them is Dorknees Inc has finally got everything in line. We are going to attempt to provide a commission painting and or printing service to all of our wonderful friends and family. Now, we'll have some more details for you about that towards the end of the video. As you guys have become aware at this point, we are not sponsored, we are not credited, and we do not take money from anybody at this point. There is no one to sponsor us except us. So right about the halfway point, we'll throw an ad in, just kind of explain where we are and what we're doing. Thank you so much for your patience with all of that. Now, the first step here, your chrome painting, you really are just going to paint everything. It really doesn't matter. I don't go out of my way to get the loincloth, but if I get it, it's fine. Because really everything's going to get some kind of paint before we're done here, so you might as well just get a good even cover. Now, we primed this model black with a brush-on primer, also from Vallejo, the black prime. And that's usually our go-to. We have a lot of these models just kind of sitting around, and that tends to be an easy way to do it depending on what the weather's like outside.
One eternity later.
With the entire model nice and chrome, we're going to get out our Talassar Blue, which is going to do a lot of the legwork for this next part, and we're going to paint all of the armor panels all over, including his helmet, except for the wings, that we are going to have be that wonderful deep metallic blue. Now, Talassar over top of a bright metal makes a wonderful metallic-y armor look that is very difficult to manage without this technique. So at this point, I've just come to terms with that this is how I'll do it. I use a similar technique on some Chaos Knights that I'm really happy with, which is what led me to this, and actually the reason we're doing this video today. We've also decided that instead of our normal just explaining the model to you, we wanted to go into a little bit of the history of what exactly is it that we're painting today. So today we're painting the Raptor Space Marine from the Chaos Space Marine Legions known as the Night Lords. The Night Lords are the 8th Legion. They would side with Horus during the Horus Heresy and rebel against the Emperor of Mankind. Led by Conrad Kurz, the quote-unquote Batman of the 40,000, these Night Lords would specialize in terror and ambush tactics. Truly one of the most interesting legions that are actively around, though I do feel like since the Heresy era and in the current 40k setting, the Night Lords have been done so dirty by Games Workshop, it's almost comical. Nevertheless, the Night Lords retain their popularity amongst the fan base as one of Chaos's premier children, so much so that Games Workshop announced having a Kill Team themed after them. Granted, this is the Legion box that they made for Kill Team previously with an upgrade sprue, but something is better than nothing. So a little more about the Night Lords. One of the most interesting characters in this entire setting, in my opinion, is Conrad Kurz, who grew up on a world called Nostromo, a crime-ridden den of just the worst kind of people you can imagine. Had a sense of justice and righteousness that simply worked on an eye for an eye. What he did was horrific and is absolutely depraved, but it was also incredibly effective. The people of Nostromo were so afraid of the Night Haunter, Conrad Kurz's name, that they all fell in line, and Nostromo entered an age of peace that would seemingly lead them into the future. Unfortunately, once Conrad had been taken by the Emperor to go join the Crusade, Nostromo had lost the threat that kept the peace, and it would return to its dastardly ways as crime and corruption once again reared its head. Fear being a fantastic method for stopping crime was not a longevity-proofed way to stop crime. Now we're back to our model, and we're going to switch over to Greedy Gold and Air Paint by the Army Painter. From this point on, we're going to have to be very, very careful because any mistake that we make on the blue armor will not be easy to fix. Take your time, make sure that your paint is the right consistency, and just go slow. There's a fair amount of trim on most Chaos models. This one is no exception. Once you're done though, you're going to have a whole new look. Back to Conrad for a minute though. So once he discovered that Nostromo had fallen back to its old ways, he was so offended by the lack of control and undisciplined and barbaric nature of his planet that he ordered the entire planet to be exploded, not with a virus, but with an actual explosion, leaving nothing in its wake, completely removing it and any trace that it had ever been there from the galaxy. The truth is, the Conrad Curze as a concept is an interesting antagonist-style character, especially amongst a horde in a den of just the worst of the worst kind of, scum and criminal villainy. To have such a dedication to what he felt was right really makes him an interesting character. Now, there's a lot more to him. There's the visions of the future and his vision of his own eventual death. And there's lots of Night Lord characters that are super interesting. There are lore channers that are much better at giving you guys more insight into this than me, so I'm not going to give you full detailed insight. I just want to skim over a couple of the really fun things about Night Lords while we try to get this guy done. Now, trim just in general isn't a great fun thing to do, especially when you know that the blue armor is so easy to mess up and so hard to fix. If you do make a real big mistake and you really genuinely can't fix it, because if you keep a wet brush next to you just to quickly fix any mistakes you make, but if you do end up with one, and it happens, just take time, let everything dry, and then paint over the mistake with the chrome color and give it the contrast again, just like we did in the first step, and it'll be fine. At this point though, if you do make a mistake, I would save it until right before the wash step to fix. Alright, and now we are on to the Contrast Blood Angels Red. We're going to use contrast paint here instead of layer paint because the silver underneath it is going to make it shine similar to the armor. It helps it look cohesive but still have that distinct red pop that the Night Lords are so well known for. This is also going to help us make sure what little details are in the wings are prominent and easy to see. With that done, we're going to switch over to Mephiston Red, the layer paint red, probably the best red I've ever used, and we're going to use that for his loincloth. It's important that we get a strong base layer of red since we're going directly over black, and for that service I have never seen a paint that works better than Mephiston Red. While we have the red out, we're going to go ahead and get the bat wings on his pauldron done. Here I'm going to go back and touch up some of that silver and make sure that the places that actually need to be silver are, as well as the belt buckles and just general tidying up. Next up we have Black Legion, which I was never a fan of the Black Templar, but Black Legion really does it for me. It's a dark black, and I'm going to use it for all of the rubbery parts in his knees and his elbow joints, anywhere that I want to show the separation of armor. A fun factoid, one of the last things Conrad Curze was quoted as saying was, "I merely punished those who had wronged, just as your false emperor now seeks to punish me. Death is nothing compared to vindication." It's worth noting he said this to the assassin who was about to kill him. We're going to pull Drake's Tooth out, which is a bleachy bone color that I really like, mostly because it's cheap and easy to get. And a couple layers down and it'll give you a solid working space to start from. We're going to do any skulls. We're going to do one of his pouches so that it stands out against the other ones. And of course we're going to do the bone decoration on his helmet. The key here is making sure that your paint is thin and making sure that you do more than one layer. Bone is just one of those colors that's like this. You're looking for the consistency of 2% milk and some patience and let it dry in between the layers and you'll get there. Alright, so now we're going to take out Drakenhof NightShade, which is my favorite blue shade. Now, if you prefer your Night Lords to be a little more poppy and a little less dingy and grimy, then you absolutely don't need this step. If you want them to be darker than this, use Nuln Oil, but I find there's a happy place with Drakenhof that really helps the model. It brings the blue out, but also provides a wonderful amount of shading. In a little bit, we're going to do just a little bit to highlight, because I want this to be a simple tutorial, but this is a really important step as far as getting the color that I'm going to present you at the end, and this is my favorite style. I prefer the slightly darker, less saturated color. Your mileage may vary. My goal here is to present you with a method to paint this that is easy to replicate and not super taxing, so it can be done over a larger scale army. If you do get some of this blue on anything, it's fun. If you get it on the gold, it'll give the gold kind of a blue hue. If you don't like it, tidy it up. If you get it on the red, it'll make for a purple shadow, which is great and just what you want. So just have some fun with it. Same for the head. I would go ahead and do the red while you're doing this and get that nice purple shadow in there. Unless you're doing Nuln Oil, and then just do Nuln Oil and it'll just be a little darker. If you're going to do Nuln Oil, I would go ahead and do the bone Nuln Oil too. We're actually going to hit it with the brown Agrax in a little bit. As I mentioned, we're going to do a couple of characters and a little bit of information. So let's talk about everyone's favorite Lord of Night, the first captain, Iago Sevatorian, also known as Sevatar, the first captain of the Night Lord's Legion and commander of the Atramentar, an elite terminator of the 8th Legion Night Lords during the Horus Heresy. He is credited as being the first Chaos Marine to say death to the false emperor, and is a fan favorite for his many stories about his interesting blend of ruthless psychotic aggression and ironic nobility. Another just fun thing about the Night Lords, if a Night Lord failed or betrayed their Primarch or their Legion gravely enough to warrant their death, they would often have their gauntlets around their hands specifically painted red. This is to show their failure and that they have been marked for death. On Nostromo, their home world before it was destroyed, there was a gang tradition of traitors and fools being tattooed so that everyone could see who the traitor and fool was and know that they were marked for death. Death was considered a gift.
There's no escape. The only hope is the sweet relief of death.
Now it's time for German Grey. I say this with not a hint of irony. This is my favorite color I think I've ever come across. I recommend this to anyone painting anything for any reason. This is a black that is soft. It is one of the best blacks I've ever used. It allows you to shade with a Nuln Oil or a black wash, highlight with a light gray. It comes off as natural looking, but because it's not a pure black, you have room to move it with shadows and with highlights. I'm going to do the belt buckles, the pouch that I didn't do in the bone color, and any piece of trim that I feel like needs to be darkened down. I want the focus to be the blue, the gold, and the red, so these other straps and things, I actually don't want much focus at all to be on them. I just want them to break up the brighter colors. So now we move back to our Mephiston Red, and we're going to bring the color up out of the cloak. As I mentioned, I do prefer my darker style, so I won't be doing the entire cloak. I want to keep some of that rich dark shadow in there, but I do want the edges to get a little bit of attention. We're also going to touch up the bat to get some color back in him, but we are not going to do the helmet because we did the helmet with the silver technique that we used in the armor. Now we're going to pop back over to Drake Tooth to get our extra layer on the bone to get it ready for its final highlight. And for that final highlight, we're going to use Gorgon Hide. I very rarely use a straight white. I almost always use these off whites. And we're going to do the head piece and the skull on the shoulder. Now we're going to thin down some seafoam gray, and we're going to use that on the tops and the bottoms of the black belts. We're going to try to get a thin line of black right in the middle, but use this to highlight the top and the bottom just to make it easier for the eye to pick out. I'm going to utilize the little wet palette behind me just to pull the paint out and make sure I know how much of it is there. I might even spring a little bit of Gorgon Hide in it if I decide I need it to be a little bit lighter. Back to Nostromo for just a moment to continue our stories. So being marked meant that there was no way around it. You were going to die. But they had to earn it with still continuing their labor. It's just one of those Warhammer things. So just a couple last things about Servitor and we'll move on. He has the Knight's Whisper, which is the name of his chain glaive. He is believed dead, though I don't believe we've actually had that confirmed. With the Siege of Terra wrapping up, there's no telling what the Horus Heresy books will do next, but there's a good chance eventually they'll have to come back and tell us what happened to the Night Lord's favorite son. He features in the Void Stalker, First Heretic, Savage Weapons, Blood Reaver, Prince of Crow, and Curse's Primarch books, where you can find stories about him and short stories about him. The Night Lords is one of those legions that, even though the way they're represented on a tabletop has never felt very good. So I fibbed earlier. We're actually going to use Contrast Skeleton Horde on our bone to make it a little less dirty and dark than Agrax Earthshade would have been. It's a lighter color, but it still has a good shading to really make you able to tell what it is you're looking at. We're also going to go ahead and get that pouch too. That way we have a little bit of this somewhere else. And as we near the end of our project here, We're going to go ahead and get some Nuln Oil out and use it on everything that is still silver and any places that we think need to be a little darker. As I was saying earlier, their stories have always been incredible. They're always very dark and very disturbing, but they're dark in a very human way. It's a very human giving in to the worst parts of your feral instincts, and I think that's what's made them so popular. There's a fantastic trilogy of books that I haven't personally read, but I've heard nothing but good things and stories about. And then we're back again to chrome, and we're going to use this for some of our final touches. We're going to go ahead and make sure that any highlights we want in our metal are done, but I also like to take this time to highlight some of the sharp edges, like the top of his knee here, with the chrome color. I have found that for me anyway, the contrast between the dark blue where we've tinted the chrome down and the bright shiny silver of where we've got just a couple of prominent edges here and there and studs and just a couple little things to catch the eye, the edges of the gold really make the model pop. It really makes the metal look metal. It's a very little thing, but I feel like it does a lot. It should not be skipped. Do this. And really, at the end of the day, the strength of your brand will almost always be determined by the strength of your lore and the relatability of your characters. Now, back to the model and touch up our gold, and we're going to call this one done, ladies and gents.
What is this?
Look, we all need a little help every now and then trying to get our piles of shame done. And we here at Dorknees Inc, we want to offer you a solution. Have us do it! That's right, Dorknees Inc for the first time ever is going to do commission work. Now, what does that mean exactly? Basically, if you need it printed and you need it painted, or you just need it painted or printed, you can commission Dorknees Inc itself and we will help you get that done. We've put together an easy to use worksheet to help guide for what it is exactly that you need done. Head over to our Buy Me a Coffee now and you can find it in the pinned comment. Thank you so much and we look forward to working with you. And we're back and we're just about done. Once you feel like you've got all the gold where you want it to be, give yourself a big high five because you did it. Thank you and have a great day.